WTIM.
You're listening to WTIM, your information station, and our morning show. It's brought to you by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Grayson Bauman. In this segment, we're joined by Jack Myers. Jack is a public affairs specialist with the Social Security Administration. Jack, good morning to you, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Grayson. I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I am doing well on this end, and it's good to hear from you here before the holiday season really kicks off. And I'm going to just say you've got pretty good news for folks that are on Social Security or drawing benefits currently, and that's the fact that they're going to be increasing in 2026. What is that increase, and what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so this is the time of year where we talk a little bit about the cost of living adjustment that's coming in the new year. And so we do know that we're going to be seeing a 2.8% increase in Social Security benefits and SSI payments in 2026. So, basically, Grayson, that's going to be, roughly 71 million Social Security beneficiaries seeing that increase, nearly 7.5 million SSI recipients seeing that increase. And it's going to be effective with the payments that will be received in January for Social Security. So that's going to be January 3rd or the second, third, or fourth Wednesday of January. And then for the SSI payment, that's going to be the December 31st payment. So, the way that works is that the Social Security payments are paid the month after they're due. So the COLA is basically effective with the 12/25 Social Security payment that will be delivered in January. And then SSI payments are paid on the first of the month. But because January 1st is a holiday, that SSI payment for January will be paid on December 31st. And so that's when people are going to see that increase. And then, of course, that increase is effective throughout the calendar year. And again, that is a 2.8% increase that is coming in 2026. And it's going to be for SSI and Social Security. And that's tied directly to the cost of living. So that is a cost of living adjustment tied to inflation.
Okay. So I think a lot of folks, nearly, I don't know, almost 80 million folks are going to be pretty happy to hear that there is a bump when it comes to that cost of living adjustment there. What does that figure out to about in terms of dollars for most folks? Obviously they hear that it's nearing that 3% mark. Do you know roughly dollar amount what that will equate to?
Yeah, so for Social Security, and that obviously is across the board because it varies a lot from individual to individual. It's tied, your Social Security specifically is tied to your historical earnings record.
Mm-hmm.
But if we talk in averages, the average Social Security benefit increase is going to be about $56 per month starting in January. And that's kind of a nice little amount to think about because what people often, and we can circle back in a moment, Grayson, to how this is all calculated, because I think that's an interesting conversation as well. But since we're talking averages, I think this is probably a good time to loop in Medicare Part B, because a lot of times what happens is when the Social Security cost of living adjustment is announced, shortly thereafter, Medicare also talks about or announces what the Part B premium is going to be for the new year. And while those are two separate issues, they often are associated in people's minds, and rightfully so, because if you're collecting a Social Security payment, your Medicare Part B premium gets deducted from your monthly Social Security payment. So when the COLA coincides with an increase in the Medicare Part B premium, what people are really interested in is what's the net effect? What's the net impact? What am I going to see next year? So, what we found out from Medicare is that the Part B premium in 2026, standard amount is going to be $202.90. So that is an increase of almost $18. It was $185 in 2025, going up to $202.90 in 2026. But if that average increase for Social Security is about $56 on, like I say, on average, that's not going to be for everybody. But if that average increase is about $56, that still does leave some increase. Not a huge one, but it still does leave some increase in the benefit amount that's coming in 2026. So it is important to talk about both of those two things together because, like I said, people do often connect them. If you want to know more about Medicare and the associated costs of Medicare, the best place to look is their website at Medicare.gov.
Okay, and the two just kind of going hand in hand often is why we're even discussing that there. So if you're not a part of a Part B premium, then you'll get that full increase, I guess, as it is. But if you are, and typically you mentioned that a lot of times that is the case, you'll see an increase, but it might not be the dollar amount you want. We're talking in averages here because everybody's is going to be a little bit different. But in that response, you mentioned to us how it's kind of figured. How is that COLA adjustment kind of made? So I'm wondering, what can you tell us?
Yeah, so that's an important thing to understand because sometimes people have misperceptions about how the cola is, derived. So basically, what it's a measurement of inflation. So as the cost of living rises or increases, so does the Social Security benefit. And the way that this is calculated is, it's automatically tied to a specific measure of inflation called the Consumer Price Index for Urban and Clerical Wage Earners, known more commonly by the abbreviation CPIW. So basically, that CPIW is a measurement of inflation, and there's a value that's put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics every single month. Okay, so there's a CPIW computed for every single month of the year. The Social Security COLA is tied directly to the third quarter average CPIW. So to come up with this 2.8% increase, the way that worked is the average CPIW from the third quarter of 2024, and the third quarter, of course, is July, August, and September. So the average CPIW for that third quarter of 2024 was compared to the average CPIW for the third quarter of 2025. If there is an increase in that average CPIW, then that increase is the COLA for the coming year. So when we compared 2024 third quarter CPIW to 2025, the 2025 one increased by 2.8%. So that's how we arrived at a 2.8% COLA for Social Security in 2026. So it is tied directly to that. If there should have, if there, for example, was a drop in that CPIW, there wouldn't be a drop in Social Security, but what would happen there is there just would be no cost of living adjustment. Historically, that hasn't happened very often, but it has happened a few years over the course of my career. What we really see is, over the last decade, the COLA increase has averaged about 3.1%. So this is a little lower than that average, but last year, or I guess, early this year, the 2025 COLA was 2.5%. So this is a little bit higher. So, basically what we're doing is we're looking at that inflation, and if there is an increase there, then that increase is going to be, directly impacting the Social Security benefits for the coming year.
And Jack, I can imagine that's probably different than what most people imagine where you came with that number from. So basically, we're taking 2024, the third quarter, July, August, and September. We're looking at that number, comparing it then to 2025 for that same date range and same data just for the newest year. We're taking the difference, and that's going to be our cost of living adjustment that is then applied with your January of 2026 benefits.
That's exactly right. And, normally people want to know, they start to get a little bit anxious about what's that COLA going to be for the next year. And it usually comes out sometime in the month of October. And that's because that final data point, which is that September CPIW, that comes out usually middle October. Now, that was a little bit delayed in 2025 because of the shutdown, but that's typically when we get that number. And so that's when you put all the pieces together and you know what that COLA is going to be for the next year.
Okay, well, I can imagine that for some folks, that is a nice thing to be able to know by October. Maybe this year different with said federal government shutdown. But I'm wondering, Jack, is there any other important 2026 figures for Social Security that you want to share and get out there? Obviously, this cost of living adjustment being what I would consider a really important piece to it, as it comes around every year and is also extra money in folks' pocket. And that's That's going to be important to people from here until the end of time. So, what about some other things in terms of Social Security in 2026 would you like to highlight?
Yeah, a couple other things I will mention. Real quick, I do want to point out that if you haven't already gotten it, you should be getting a letter telling you what your increase is going to be. You could have seen that letter a little earlier in your My Social Security account if you went to ssa.gov, established your own My Social Security account, and opted out of the paper notices for COLA. So if you're wanting to get that information as early as possible next year, go ahead and create that My Social Security account now, and then go into your preferences and opt out of the paper notices for COLA. Then you'll get that as soon as possible. You'll get that notification in your online message center. Again, that's ssa.gov, My Social Security, to get that electronic message. But if you hadn't done that, we are in the process of sending those COLA notices out in December, so you probably have already gotten that paper notice. But to go back to your other question about the changes, there are some important figures that do change in the new calendar year, and they kind of come out right around the same time, or at not right around, right at the same time that the COLA announcement is made. One of the biggest ones has to do with earnings limitations. So if you're receiving a Social Security benefit that is not based on disability, so Grayson, I'm talking about retirement benefits or spousal benefits, widows or widowers benefits, those types of things that are not based on you being disabled. If you are under your full retirement age throughout the full calendar year 2026 and you're receiving a Social Security benefit not based on disability, if you would like to work, there is a limit to how much you can earn and still collect Social Security without having to pay any Social Security back. That limit is increasing in 2026. In 2025, it's $23,400. In 2026, it's going up to 24,480. So if you're keeping your eye out for that, that number is out. 2026, it'll be 24,480. If you are going to be hitting your full retirement age in calendar year 2026, you probably know that once you get there, there's no limit. So you can work and earn as much as you want and still collect your benefits. But for the months leading up to full retirement age, there is a limit to how much you can earn. It's quite a bit higher than that prior one I was talking about, though. So in the years prior to attainment of full retirement, you're subject to that lower limit, 24,480, like I mentioned for 26. The year you get there, for the months leading up, so let's say you're hitting full retirement age of June of next year, January through May, you'd be subject to a limit of 65,160. So that's the new figure for 2026. Pretty high amount, especially if you're getting to that full retirement age early in the calendar year. So big changes there. There are also some changes if you're on disability. If you want to work and collect Social Security disability, you may be able to. The threshold you need to be aware of is something we call substantial gainful activity. There are two figures. If you are blind, it's quite a bit higher, so it's $2,830 a month. If you have a disability other than blindness, the threshold is $1,690. So if you stay below those thresholds, you could receive Social Security disability and work and would not lose those benefits. So you can find all that on the website, ssa.gov. Look at our COLA information, and then there's a fact sheet that has these numbers and a few others that have changed. It's right there handy to look at.
Well, Jack, I feel like this is a busy and interesting time of year, probably for you as a public affairs specialist with the Social Security Administration. I'm glad we're getting a chance to kind of dive into these things. But again, visit ssa.gov and maybe already make that account a thing that's already happened for you if you haven't already. So we'll come back around and we'll join Jack Myers, public affairs specialist with the Social Security Administration, to tell us a little bit more about what to expect in 2026. We'll have a little bit of time to do so. We'll see what we can get in. You're listening to WTIM, your information station.
WTIM.
And we're back with Jack Myers, Public Affairs Specialist with the Social Security Administration here on the WTIM Morning Show, brought to you by People's Bank and Trust and Landmark of Taylorville. We've been talking a lot about this cost of living adjustment, how they even come to this figure, and we're going to turn now to Jack Myers to just go ahead and put a bow on it. Jack, how can we kind of encapsulate and wrap everything up from today?
Yeah, so we started talking before the break, Grayson, about some of the other things that are changing in the new year. So just a couple other figures that are changing. When a person is trying to build eligibility for Social Security benefits, they do so by working and paying into the system. So the real way we count that up is through what we call credits, okay? So you have to earn a certain amount of money to get one credit. You can get up to 4 credits per year, and you need 40 credits for a retirement benefit. So in 2026, the amount of income required to earn one credit will increase from $1,810 to $1,890, and that's going to be gross wages or net earnings from self-employment if you work for yourself. So just to kind of keep that in mind, 1890 is that new threshold for 2026 to get you those credits that you need. And then the other thing I want to mention is that SSI benefits are going from $967 for the max in 2025 up to $994 in 2026, and that is, of course, that 2.8% increase.
Okay, well, Jack, we've got 30 seconds here. Where is the best place to find out more on all of this?
The best place is to go online to our website. So you're going to go to ssa.gov. Once you get there, you can look for information about COLA. You can find this fact sheet and more. I also would encourage you while you're there to set up that My Social Security account. That's your own personal portal to Social Security information, and it's just so valuable. You can learn and do so much with it.
If you haven't already, it's time to do so. Jack, as always, thanks for joining us, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you as well. Jack Myers, Public Affairs Specialist with the Social Security Administration here on WTIM.